Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Mark Luckey. He is a mental fitness coach, a TEDx speaker, former CIO, karate champion, and a tech resourcing veteran. Mark brings a blend of corporate leadership, martial arts, and mental fitness practice to individuals and businesses who want to thrive. So, this is my brief introduction to you, Mark. I know there's a lot more to uncover about what you are, who you are. So the full bio will be at the end. The question that I love asking, I always begin this way. Who are you in your own words as of this moment?
As of this moment, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Secondly, who am I? Who am I? It's quite a big, simple question, but big question, because I could give you all of the things that you could find out about who I am.
Yeah.
Technically, I'm a middle-aged white guy living in Australia, but beyond that, I'm someone who's maybe found that part in life where at middle age, I'm actually starting to really, really enjoy it. So I'm someone who tends to enjoy what they're doing and bring energy to what they're doing. And I'm starting to find myself in that part of life where I'm genuinely excited what sits beyond 50 for me, because I turned 50 this year.
It did.
So
Wow.
I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm all of those things you introduced me to, but I'm someone now who's intrigued and seeing what is left in the rest of life and what can I create from it.
I love that. So far, what do you love most about life?
What I've loved most about my life has been the places and the experiences that I've been able to have. That when the moments when I've gotten beyond, whether it be my expectations or thoughts of how something might roll out with someone, I love it when you find yourself in that moment and something entirely different happens that is a bit magical. And it might be the person you bump into while you're walking your dog, the person you end up being sat next to when your plane's delayed for 12 hours, or just the random conversations like this, someone who I will never meet, highly likely only have limited interactions with again in the world, but you have these moments just to find out that there's 7 or nearly 8 billion other souls on the planet, each with their own story and journey. And that's the thing that I'm really enjoying these days.
Me too. It's fascinating how we all have different perceptions of life, different perspectives. And I think ultimately we have different stories. And I think that's where this whole human experience really happens, within the stories that we tell. And then, the stories in our minds, and then the experiences we have lived, and so on. How do you feel about this idea of storytelling? Is that something that's innate to the brain, or it's just part of being human, a creative being?
It's interesting because we start as kids and we're told stories, whether the stories are nursery rhymes, whether they are derived from whatever the religious basis is for the culture or the society we're living in. And then we move beyond those things, and I studied chemistry and biochemistry, which was not stories, but facts and figures. But then in order to explain the value of that technology or that tech work we were doing, we needed to be able to put it into words that worked for people who didn't know that technical terminology, which then comes back to narrative and storytelling. And now I believe narrative and storytelling is more important than the facts, because we've got to find the way to bring people on that journey with us along the way. I think as long as it's not contrived or too manufactured, especially in sales, or especially if we're trying to sell ourselves to someone, but if it's real, then it's much more interesting. And when I talk to people on coaching through particularly presentation skills or business management skills, it's, give people a narrative that's authentic, that they can relate to, that is coming from your soul, and they will see who you are, and they will more than likely like it if you're willing to go that step. So I think it's really important. And you believe it's important also?
Yes, yeah. So, what's your idea of the soul and spirituality? How do you integrate this within the coach, being a mental fitness coach? Is that something that you integrate at all?
It's a really interesting one. So Australians, whilst we are catching up, Australians generally are a little more immature, if there is
Mm,
not a, I can't think of a better word, when it comes to what we understand in spirituality. And I say that, I can say that because I am Australian, but also because I've worked lots in India where at a baseline, spirituality is part of who they actually
mm,
are.
yes.
So if people perceive Australians as being fit and outdoors and healthy, which maybe once upon a time was true, not so much now.
Yes. Yeah. Ah.
But never in Australia have I been in a meeting with people and been walking to lunch between buildings, which, and then they stop at a small shrine on the side of the road and bow and pray. But if I'm in India, and particularly this time of year around Diwali, if we're walking from the office to lunch and we walk past either small pujas or small little shrines, they will stop and pay respect. And everyone just sort of stops,
Yeah.
chats, and keeps walking.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think a lot of Australians still have spirituality intertwined with religion. And me being born, raised as a Catholic and then going through working out what that meant for me, which for me personally wasn't much. But then coming back to things later on, especially in the pandemic, getting up early and finding some space for myself each morning and exercising and then meditating as the sun rose. And it was that
Mm,
first feeling of, wow, there's something in this moment, the creation of the day, whatever it is. And ultimately, I think spirituality, the definition I'm comfortable with is that it's part of being connected to something greater than ourselves, that there is always something greater than what we are. And even if that is just an
mm,
ideal that many people are striving towards, maybe that's the sense of what spirituality is. But I know if I have this conversation with my dad, he's sort of, no, stepdad rather, spirituality is in a church with Jesus, Mark. That's
mm.
his definition.
Yeah.
And I think it's that notion of, well, there's something else, but what is it? But I can't put my finger on what the next thing is. And then it just becomes that eternal question. And you mentioned before we ask the question, but the most important part is the conversation that we have about it,
Mm,
but not about the answer we come to. It's the conversation of spirituality, which is the part that is fundamental, I believe.
mm. So the topic is from surviving to thriving with mental fitness practices. Because that words there, mental fitness,
Mm.
you being a mental fitness coach, and I talk a lot about mental health here in healing. What is your idea of mental health? What is to be mentally healthy
Ah,
from your perspective?
if I may reframe the question a little bit,
Yeah.
one I get asked a lot is mental fitness versus mental health. I know you were once upon a time, you still look super fit, but putting it in a gymnasium setting,
Mm,
mental fitness is when we work on ourselves to strengthen ourselves, to build resilience, to be stronger and ready for the day when we need that strength.
right.
Mental
Yeah.
health practice is more in a clinical setting when we've gone beyond our threshold and we can no longer heal ourselves or we need assistance in healing ourselves. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer what mental health is, but I believe it would revolve around generally a healthy regard for ourselves and others, and something around having more of a balance of positive or constructive thoughts rather than looping negativity. I'm not a
Yeah.
psychologist, and I've got enough fancy books here that have tried to give me a definition of mental health in 50 words or less, but I think
Yes.
it's also accepting that as part of that spectrum of what is mental health is there are good days and really bad days. There are days where for some reason, no matter what we do, we'll wake up and we'll still feel less capable than yesterday or less
Right.
positive.
Right.
Conversely, we'll have a great night's sleep and the day is amazing and we feel great.
Yes.
My belief on mental fitness is that by doing the things I do each day, which may seem, actually, I know they seem mad to people, but they are the things that mean that most of the time I feel capable and great and ready for the day.
Mm,
Not always happy, because that doesn't, happiness is this much. It's that journey to the happy or the work on it. So,
interesting. So they are basically practices for mental. fitness, and there are so many of them. You talk about gratitude, you just mentioned now, journaling, mindfulness, meditation, visualization. Of worst case scenarios, that's kind of interesting to see too. It's almost like visualizing death. Is that, I remember interviewing somebody recently. She said, always ask the question, is this going to kill me? Whatever is happening. If it's
Yeah.
not a death situation, so you're okay. You can do something about it. And then you talk about, the Bhagavad Gita. That's something in the teachings there that really, that's in my heart, really. The Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutra, and that's Vedanta. I'm a student of Vedanta, as you know. So that really interests me. And you talk about fate. There are so many concepts that you speak of that resonates true within the human experience of body mind. But I always, for some reason, my focus is freedom. So I kind of,
Oh.
I just let whatever that's here kind of follow its own energy and do what it needs to be done. Kind of in a destiny kind of way. I love that you talk about fate. So I think I will start there. Talk to me about this idea of, I don't know how I speak Portuguese, but I probably will pronounce in Portuguese, amor fati. Is that how you pronounce? Which is really the love of fate.
The stoic practice of accepting one's fate.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before the Bhagavad Gita, and you mentioned that disconnection before around doing the right thing, but detachment from the outcomes of it.
Yeah.
And amor fati in that context is some days, no matter what you do, things will not fall your way.
Right.
And when that happens, you still need to keep moving on. And one of my favorite stories that I think explains this was William Tell, the fabled archer who was the most accurate person with the bow and arrow. And they put the apple on top of either his son's head or someone else's head. And the story goes on that the best archer in the world draws back the arrow, the calmest hand, the calmest mind, and lets go. But if God's fate blows a wind just that much, and that arrow deviates that much, at that moment, it's out of that person's control to do it. And we very seldom actually get the outcomes we truly, truly want from the effort we put in. So amor fati is understanding that the actual perfection is that point as you release. Beyond that, what happens, happens.
Yeah.
Conversely, the saying goes, but when you do have the amazing outcome at the end, don't go partying for 6 weeks. In the same way that we say, when things go bad, go, wow, that just isn't what I expected. What can I learn? What do I need to do differently? Or did it just happen? Conversely, if things go really, really well, go, wow, that is fantastic. That is so awesome. But now I must move on. So it needs to be in both the celebration of the joy and the acknowledgement when things go badly that we don't get caught, because in both cases we get stuck. For myself, pandemic was a really good one. We had a travel business, don't have a travel business anymore. I can't change what happened with someone playing with bats in a marketplace in a foreign land. That happened.
Right.
No matter what work I did through that period of time, that travel business or my part in it wasn't going to survive. Conversely, great things have come of it, but making a decision that accepting fate or accepting what happens makes it a hell of a lot easier. That stoic notion, zone 1, zone 2, what's in my control, what's out of my control, what's in my control of the actions, what's outside is what other people do with my actions. And on it goes. And the Bhagavad Gita says, disconnect from the outcomes. I believe Japanese psychology also has a similar thing of like, just keep doing the right thing. But I also don't like the idea of amor fati on the flip side of that my fate is sealed. Otherwise, I will stop striving. So even if something doesn't go well the first time, the 8th time, if I still think I can get better at it or it's worth striving for, which means I haven't yet learned the lesson of that failure or the poor result that came out at the end, then I'll keep striving to try and do it because I won't accept that yet. Maybe I will tomorrow, who knows?
Yes. Yeah. So it's the idea the acceptance can change everything or create that the foundation, the ground of calmness, so we can do something about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe not, right? We just continue to stay calm throughout the situation. And that has a lot to do, I think, with duty. I think we mentioned responsibilities. So the Bhagavad Gita, it's very clear in that because they talk about the goals of life. Most of us kind of think in that way, right? So there's the Dharma, the Karma, the Artha, and then the Moksha. So that would be freedom. Most people don't think about freedom that much. So we go by duty, responsibility, pleasure, and then wealth, per se. That's might be the accurate translation there. But then we forget or ignore liberation. Like, what about if this is just an experience and it is impermanent, like everything is? So I think that's also a beautiful reminder for me all the time that this is impermanent. This is not, whatever it is happening, good or bad, it won't last.
Yes.
So that's my guiding principle to get through this, which we call life. Does it make sense to you, that part of the Gita, Mark?
It does. And I just wrote an article on this one for Arjuna's Dilemma.
Oh yes, I have it here.
And that notion of responsibility and so on. And as I said to you, I'm only just scratching the surface of understanding. But that bit where he's saying, I don't want to go to war because even though that's my duty, it means killing my family and friends, those who raise me and so on. And then he's told, yes, but this is all impermanent. People don't really die. They just get recycled or reincarnated and so on, which is different from the Catholic or the Christian notion of, well, you ascend or you go down depending on it all. But that one's quite hard to grasp because right here, right now feels very real to me. So on one hand, I can't accept what happens when that ends. But on the other part, well, I can't just go out and do bad things or treat them with disrespect. And then I feel the balance in that as well. Honor the moment, honor the work that's gone into something today, the effort, someone else's effort. And even though it is permanent, so even more important to be in the moment and enjoy those moments of as the now.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's what Vedanta says. There's the first thing they say, you are God. Basically, you are divine. Everything is divine. Or everything is happening in God, which is even beyond that. But then now it's up to you to explore and to have them kind of train the mind to embody that knowledge. If that's my path for some reason. So I don't know if that makes sense to you at this moment, but it has changed everything for the body mind here. I navigate this, seeing everything as God itself, the divine, everything as divine. When I say God, it's complicated because the mind kind of possesses the idea and kind of, right? It reduces to something that's not accurate. But what is your understanding of this idea of God?
So there's, if I may pick up on a couple of things to try and qualify my answer.
Yeah.
The word, I can't remember the words you used, but when the mind possesses that notion of what God is.
Yes.
And what it is for you and what it is for me is different, in the same way that at the moment you're in your studio, I believe, in New York, and it's just after sunrise in Melbourne here in Australia. And I'm looking at a television screen and you're looking at a laptop and you can see a bookcase, but you can't touch it like I can. So our realities are different. And the next step from that is someone who's coaching me at the moment who said, to assume that other people see things or think the way that we do is like having a sore back and thinking everyone else has a sore back.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And at the start, when you asked me, who am I in my own words at the moment, now it's easy to answer because now I'm more accepting of the fact that I don't actually know what God is or what my mind perceives as a construct of it, but I'm actually really comfortable with what other people feel for it in their life. And that I think from a freedom perspective, when we get to that point of simply being comfortable that other people are doing it differently or have that belief, whether it's Jewish, Christian, Islam, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever it is, that when we can stop judging that and just accepting that, that actually frees us to then go into, wow, why do they see it that way? And as soon as we ask the why, not they shouldn't, or I do it differently, then we're free. And we're free to explore it. And then we start, I think, releasing ourselves from our own histories, our own belief structures, and we begin to be able to challenge our own beliefs a little more.
Mm.
What is God?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I think the construct of it was forced into me for 10 years by what was written in a book. Because that's what it was in the 80s in Australia, is this is, as a Catholic altar boy at a Christian school, this is what God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit is.
Yes.
But no one told me there were Indians who had a totally different structure of looking at it with 170 gods. I think in reality, God serves as sort of a bit of a cultural keeper for people, that keeps them aligned to doing the right things when their own mind isn't yet ready to comprehend, but that's just what we should do anyway. As opposed to, but the book says do it. No, it should be you do it because it's the right thing to do. And then we step back to all of those historical texts that, the Bible 1,800 years old, Stoicism 300 or 500 years before, the Bhagavad Gita a few thousand years before. And they all in this notion say, do the right thing for the reason of doing the right thing.
Yes.
So I don't know. It's a big question, and I've not had enough magic mushrooms this morning to really get with you on that one.
Yeah, that would have helped. Yeah, that would have helped a lot.
And it's tough. And when I think we get to that point of being able to appreciate the beauty in the moment, and that's the closest I've quite gotten to what is it. But I can't believe that it ends. Like, I see myself in the mirror and every now and then reflect, well, I'm getting older, grayer, working a bit harder to maintain a girlish figure. Or, someone says, wow, you've gotten old. And it's sort of, I haven't seen you for 15 years. This is what happens, dude. We get wrinkles, we age. But it's hard to believe that it ends. And maybe that's why we keep getting caught in that notion of, well, what is the next bit? And then, of course, all of the religions say, well, you can't comprehend that because you're bound to this body in this plane just now. When you are freed, if you've done the right things, you will see what is next.
Yes. I would love to talk a bit more too about the sage and the habit. So you talk about, again, ancient detachment that has to do with the Gita, and then the atomic habits, mindful merging, habit stacking. There's so much that you talk about here in your teachings, but I want to follow also the topic outline that we had. So that's one. That's something that I would love to talk to you about. I'd love for you to go through them. And then also the idea of legacy. You mentioned that in the outline that you sent to me. What is our legacy as a question?
Yes.
That's another big one. So yeah, wherever you want to start with all that.
Sure. Well, Atomic Habits was one of the books that started making sense of things. So briefly, my pandemic journey was all going great, fell in a hole, and I decided, as we've only got 6 weeks of lockdown, if only we'd had 6 weeks of lockdown in Melbourne, I'm going to do a self-help experiment. And in short, I'm going to do everything possible in every self-help book and see what happens. So I'm going to try the fasting, the meditation, all these things that one day I will, all of the things that one day I was going to do, I did. And I journaled them. So these are my pandemic journals. So they got turned into about 100,000 words of short stories, reflections, and so on. And Atomic Habits, and then what led, and I got into the books by reading things on Google Play, and you'd finish the book and then it says, have you thought about reading this? And I'd just say, yes. And then I'd read it. Then I'd write notes about it and reflect. Yeah. So Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Atomic Habits and the science says that most of what we do is habitual. So we are ultimately, as people, the sum of our habits. So if we want to go on a journey from version U now to new U version 2 up here and make that progress, if most of what we do is habits, that journey is a stepping stone of upgrading our habits to ones that serve us more on the journey to being the better version of ourselves. And then when you say to people, well, think about it. When you
Yeah.
drive your car, do you think about a manual car, putting the foot in, the gear, checking left, checking right, indicating, slowing down 30 meters? Or do you just turn up at work in your car and park your car and you've left? Because everything was habitual. And
Right.
habit stacking is learning how to do the clutch, the brake, the gear lever, the indicator, one after the other. So if you then look at that from a morning perspective, well, if you wake up in the morning and my phone is in another room, but if your first thing in the morning is you pick up your phone and you doom scroll about the election or deaths in the world or the wars or whatever, then you're starting your day filling your mind with negativity and things you can't change. And they feel good because dopamine goes, oh, now you're angry and and that's how you start your day. And so that habit of those first minutes, conversely, wake up, go to the bathroom, have a vitamin drink, get dressed, get out the door, and even walk, get home and meditate. And that's your first 30 minutes. Then habitually over time, that stacks up. Do I drive to the gym or do I run to the gym, get there, and my habit is to stretch up and loosen up and increase mobility before I start forcing myself, to go up a next level, then habitually.
Yeah.
And then what I love at the end of all of this is that notion of Kaizen or change for good, where I believe, and there is a deeper exploration of this. Someone else who coaches me will be going, Mark, there's much more to Kaizen than just good change and Japanese car manufacturing. But that notion of habitual Kaizen when we are seeking for ways to improve, not because we're fundamentally attached to perfectionism, but wow, what did I learn today? Well, the lesson is only worth something if I put it into action, and into action should be on the pathway to a better outcome. Is what I really like about that notion.
Yeah.
Where I think it becomes challenging in a coaching context for people is understanding how habitual thoughts are very much the same way for us, the way we drive the car, get dressed, put on our shoes. Do we go sock, shoe, shoelace, or sock, sock, shoe, shoe?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's habit, which serves us because populations improve as we habitually automate. Automation is a habit, and so on and so forth. But mentally, when I hear this person's name, does that trigger me to then think negativity, hateful, locking up, get angry? Or can I change that habitual trigger to being something else now so that I don't go into a loop of negativity and then spiral that into depression?
Right.
What is a belief? A belief is a habitual thought that we had so many times that we no longer challenge it.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by habits. And then why do we break them? Why do we change them? Well, because we're human. We have attachments to an old idea of who we once were, and that version tries to keep pulling us back away from who we're trying to become, because we've been doing that habitual version of Mark for 50 years. And what I'd like to do this week is become a new Mark. So in 7 days out of about 18,000, I would like to change everything.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
habits are tough to break, easier to make.
Do you have like a timeline when it comes to habit changing? That for you, what has been your experience when it comes to
Yeah.
time duration? How long does it take to change?
I've got some interesting perspectives on this one, because the science says it's between 65 and 90 days, depending on the research, the book, the person, the scenario, and so on and so forth. And then there's the habit loop, which is the trigger, the automated response that then in turn gives us a satisfying result, which in turn reinforces the habit loop.
Yeah.
And to build a habit, we've actually got to modify an old one. It's not just something brand new. It's kind of, well, I'm currently doing this and it takes me here, but now I want to do it and go here. So I've got to modify something in there. And it is definitely a long period of time. It's not 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
So I'll come back. And the reason for that is because when we finally get around to thinking it's worth doing the work to change the habit, we're in pain in that moment. It might be financial. The smoker is coughing too much. the person's put on too much weight, or they're angry and they're ruining friendships. Like, I've got to change. And they take it all from in their mind to action. Because the first three parts of change are all contemplation, but no action, so nothing happens. And then filled with that anger and that energy and that vision and drive, we plow through the impossible. I'll just use the gymnasium metaphor as the easiest one. And we start pushing the weights, and the weight comes off, and we look a bit better, and we're forging through. Then we get to that midsection when we're trying to consolidate the habit. And it's about halfway through the midsection, around week 7 or 8, where we go, actually, you know what? I'm looking pretty good. I'm breathing pretty well. I've lost a bit of weight. One donut's not going to hurt. Yeah, it's only one donut. All of this hard work. Have the donut, and all that's good. And then, of course, tomorrow, now that the dopamine's going, you remember donuts now, don't you, Mark?
Yes.
So have another donut tomorrow. Before we know it, the smoker's back on 10 cigarettes a day. And it's because they've forgotten the pain that drove the change in that moment. And then the next part is that by pushing through that tiny bit, it's after then that the magic really becomes real. And I reflect on my own life, and I'm pretty driven. People say I'm disciplined. It's more that I've just learned how to kind of do stuff better. But even so, what I've learned is that we self-sabotage in that last little bit. Everyone does this in some way, shape, or form, because we're a bit scared of what happens when we give up all of the excuses on why. What will happen if I absolutely commit to this thing? If I get fit, I'll find the perfect partner, or this will happen, or I'll get the job, or what else. And what we're scared of is, what if I just do everything and I still am not good enough? Detachment from the outcome. So we protect ourselves from what if it doesn't work out when I give 101%, when I do absolutely everything that I should do. What if it doesn't work still? Does that mean I'm crap? Does that mean I'm not good enough? Am I delusioned? So what I'll do is, just before that major event in a year, I'll just self-sabotage a little bit and go, oh, well, maybe if I'd slept a bit better the week before, or not had that drink, or, I am a champion. That's okay. It's just in that last moment. That's what I think we do. But if we get past that bit, and especially a coach, and that might be one of our children, it might be the significant other, a parent, or the close friend who goes, dude, you're about to undo all of that hard work. Just stick on this program right now. God, I can keep going on this for ages. But do you know that victory to get past the last of the hurdles? It's not like 3 weeks of grinding. It's winning that moment in 1 minute where the person goes, if you light that cigarette, you're back to day 0, which is okay. You can start again. Or you can have day 68. Right now, win this 1 minute. Win this minute, win this moment, walk away from the cigarette, get rid of the trigger again.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, avoid the trigger. So don't put your phone near your door. Put your phone in another room. Get up, go to the bathroom, get dressed, get out the door.
Yeah.
These sorts of things. And victory is in those little 1 minutes of the control, and then leaning back, and then continuing on. And on that one, again, the person coaching me the other day said, well, if you're on a 90-day program and you've got someone going through and achieving the most amazing results in a 90-day gym program, there's something in the back of their mind, which is, on day 91, I can do everything that I did back on day 0, which was the reason for starting the 90-day journey. And we have to learn to make that 90 days a continuity of what's my next thing, not how do I regress back. Told you I could crap on for ages about this one, Valeria.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
It's just the human nature part of it.
So in a way, Mark, it's really, how about starting with the idea that we're already enough? I'm already complete. I'm already where I'm supposed to be. I'm everything that I'm looking for. That's my mantra. After trying so hard, making so many changes, and still being unhappy, and feeling unfulfilled and incomplete, I just ended all it and said, wait a minute, let me start with the end in a way. I'm already there. So that has changed everything for me. I know not everyone it's ready for that, right? I don't know if this is a strategy. For me has been the path to peace, the path to
Yeah.
freedom. Somebody said something beautiful, said, every path leads to God or leads to freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no wrong path anyway.
This is why the conversation is more important than the answer.
Yes.
Because if the path leads somewhere, the conversation is enlightening even without an answer, then it's still better than where we were.
Yeah. What is the difference between bad habits or bad habit and addiction and an obsession?
Ooh. What is the difference between bad habit and addiction?
Yeah.
One might argue that addiction is a bad habit by nature,
Yeah.
because addiction implies I can't let go of it, which
Right.
means I am not free of it.
Yeah.
A bad habit, is there good and bad, or is there just is? But a bad habit is one that when it fulfills its cycle is not serving us, is a bad habit. And addiction is that one where I believe the dopamine rush is so strong, the echo of the dopamine before it happens, have the cigarette, have the drink, do that thing, even though logically, it's so powerful that it overrides us. So I think a habit is something that we're doing without thinking. And addiction is when we maybe are aware of the habit, we can't break away from it, and thus we've lost our freedom. How was that?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Right. A habit, something you're aware of and you can't, and you're trying to change it. In addiction, it has taken control, right, of everything. The mind and the body. Because a lot of times it's physiological too. It's not just psychological
Yeah.
addiction. And, we talk a lot about freedom here, and I always ask that question. But then somebody asked me something here recently. Oh, can I interview you? I would love to have you on my podcast. And I said, oh, yeah, sure. So what would we'll talk about? And then I said, I'm only interested in freedom. That'll be my topic. And then she said, so what is freedom to you? That. And then I said, it's not about freedom, being free from, but it's getting closer to the freedom that we already are. So it always goes back to the idea that I'm already free. I'm already complete. So even, the mind might be obsessed with freedom because it has to do with karma and being here in the body and all that. I'm very compassionate for my mind and my body. But there's something beyond that, and I know there is. So that might be a moment the good time to ask you about this idea of freedom. What is freedom to you at this moment?
What is freedom as at this moment?
Yeah.
In this context, I'm lucky of the life that I've lived and the place where I find myself now, that I can provided I don't harm others and all of the logical, legal constructs around it all, I'm free to say and think what I like without fear of persecution.
Right.
And as I've gotten older, I appreciate just how valuable that is for someone, that I take for granted that I could put on social media today, all of the leaders in Australia, one by one, have got these flaws.
Right.
And there will be a social media storm of supporters and disagreeers, but I will not face persecution. So I understand that I have a level of privilege that I can exercise that freedom of thought. But I lose my freedom the moment I make the post and then let everyone else's thoughts, and I get caught up in that storm, because then now I am a slave to the opinion of the other people there.
Yeah.
Even though I know logically that they have their thoughts, I have mine. So in that context, one might argue, well, we own the house, so I'm not a slave to mortgage.
Yeah.
But I was for years and was happy. That was part of my journey.
Yeah.
One might say, well, I'm not totally free because sometime in an hour or so I have to go and collect my daughter from her rowing event this morning, and later on I have to go and teach karate. Well, I don't have to do either of those, but then she's going to be pissed off sitting going, where's Dad? This is like an hour and you should have been here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same with the kids if I'm going to teach and so on. But I still have my obligations, my things I believe are right, but I can think what I want. And so that's kind of what freedom is.
Yeah.
If I may divert back to something you raised before that I am still grappling with is, though, this notion of I am enough and I am everything and I'm already everything I need to be.
Yes.
My challenge on that one for me is, so why would I bother improving or keeping trying to be a different version of myself if I'm already enough?
Mm.
And I haven't reconciled that one, only because I heard some great conversations on this the last couple of weeks. And ultimately, you again asked at the start, who am I right now? I'm mostly free. You know, I enjoy my life day to day.
Yeah.
So I'm free mostly from worry. I overthink things. I overplan. I've got whiteboards full of notes. I journal
Books. Yeah.
excessively, which is sometimes meditations, thoughts, work plans, whatever it is. I'm probably not free from my ambition of things I want to achieve and so on, but there's some things that I'm happy to be not free from because they drive me forward, because I believe that I can still be more in that part of me. So I'm sorry to flick the question back, but can I ask you, how do you reconcile that part? Because I have not yet found the balance in that I am enough, but I still want to be more. How do you reconcile that, Valeria?
It's almost like, I heard a metaphor that was beautiful. Like you are riding this bike and then all of a sudden you're really in high speed and then all of a sudden you just kind of jump out of the bike. It will continue to go to just by on its own will ride itself. So it's that idea that we can't, by realizing that you're already free, that you're already enough, complete, the infinite, having this finite experience, it actually doesn't change anything from human perspective. It just stays the same, but at the same time it does. So it's a change of perception, really, that's very subtle. So no one can really tell. People talk about enlightenment. Oh, he's enlightened, or she's, but nobody can really tell unless, I think the only way you can tell is when they're going through something really tough, like a very challenging situation, death of their own bodies, or something that anybody would freak out and then behave differently. They are peaceful. They are just, and then that's when you know that they really embody, they know that they are already free. So they are not afraid of anything. I think fear, that might be the ultimate way of knowing for sure. So I have been tested a lot already in my life. And one of the things that I noticed very clearly is that I kept going, the fear was there, but then courage, what the concept of courage would just kind of keep that body mind just going forward. That's why I'm here after so many challenges. But I think fear, it's an interesting thing about when it comes to embodying that idea of being enough, being complete.
The final part of fear, when we were talking before in that habit cycle, is the bit where you go, I'm putting down all of my get out of jail free cards and I'm committing to this last step without fear. Because most people can't. And the odds change in our favor phenomenally when we are willing to go into a new playground that others aren't willing to play in.
Right.
Because most people won't go all the way.
Right.
Because they're scared of the last step. And it can still be terrifying. But still being able to act when terrified.
That's it. Yeah. You talk about paralysis, right? Just kind of being petrified and not doing anything. It's part of the human experience too. And if that happens, so I go back to acceptance again and compassion. So always accepting the reactions and the responses of body, mind. So I'm not judging them. That's very important, that there's no judgments. And you just, again, it's this graceful dance with whatever comes your way. So that to me, that's my main practice, really spiritual. If there's something called spiritual practice, that's it. Just dance with anything that comes my way. So it has been fascinating. We danced with I danced like with my husband, my dog, but with the hurricane that came around here, gosh, Mark, that was scary. The body was just so like hidden fears that I was not really aware of, because it's so, the winds, they're so powerful. They make it, and it's all about fear, really, because hurricanes don't kill a lot of people. That's the truth. I just found out as a fact.
So, because I can understand it's disempowering when Mother Nature's letting go. It's just sort of, wow, I am literally not even this
Yes.
big. If we expand out this bit to this big, it's still only
Yeah.
this big. What happens to people? So when the wind stops, because we don't have, we have crazy storms here, but we don't have that in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So you're inside and you're having the hurricane going wild outside. And at some stage, 2 or 3 days later, when you step outside and you re-engage with people back in the flesh, what do you see? Do you see something different in them? Uh, Is
Mm.
there a feeling of people where they're sort of, we're still here? Does that happen, or does it just happen all the time that no one goes that deep anymore?
That's an interesting question, because I was really focused on the environment when I saw the trees down and how quick, like everything from one form, one state, it changed. So that kind of fascinates me about the impermanence of everything. Basically, I'm very fascinated. The mind, I have been trained the mind to see it that way. Everything is impermanent.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I actually have fun with those things because I mean, not that I don't like it. It caused a lot of financial troubles for a lot of people. We didn't lose anything, but I know a lot of people did.
mm,
But I think it's just it's a message for all of us, isn't it? Like, how attached are you to, or how much do you really think this is fixed? This is forever. So I think
yeah.
it's challenging our belief systems, our attachments, all these, the natural disasters and all. So I was focused on the environment more than people for some reason. For some reason.
That's interesting. Well, next time, see if that happens. See if there is a difference.
Yeah, I will. I will. And hopefully, yes, I will. I will remember that. So we're almost at the end. I want to go back to the legacy. Remember that?
Ah, yes, yes.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. So I know that, gosh, you have done so much there. Your legacy will be really beautiful on this plane once you leave the body. So,
Maybe.
but did you have something in mind? Is that something that you actually reflect upon when it comes to leaving this something here in this world after the body's gone?
I used to have very fixed notions of what legacy should be.
Right,
And then legacy is really what happens after we're gone.
right.
So I shouldn't have a fixed notion of what happens after I'm gone because I'm not going to be here. And why should anyone who's dead be telling everyone else what they should be doing?
Yes, I agree.
And
Yeah.
it's a bit like seeing someone, seeing a beggar and feeling desperately sorry for their circumstance, no matter what it is that finds them sitting there and having to ask for money to survive, and then giving them $20 and going, but don't spend that on drugs and alcohol. Well, if I'm giving them $20, that's their choice. And where I've gotten to with legacy, and it's one of
Yeah.
the last parts of my TEDx talk, and it's kind of the part that I liked the most, and it was, as well as the relief of getting through without making too many errors, was the idea of planting a tree that my
Oh,
grandchildren
I love that.
will play under with their children, because that's long after I'm gone. And if all I can do is simply give themselves a place in the shade to find some moments of joy,
Hmm.
I don't, if everything is so impermanent, then aiming for a legacy beyond that is maybe the equivalent of dying with $3 million in the bank, as
Right.
opposed to having lived a life. I need to be careful of my choice of words at the moment, but I have someone who is very close to me, who is now going into the final phases of life, only 6 or 7 years older than me, through having had long-term diseases since their teenage years. And this is one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah.
And I spoke to his brother, and it was about spending the money now rather than wasting it. And the first thing is that his kids spell the word love TIME. We want time with you is love. that comes from another coach. But the
Huh.
second one was he explained very clearly to me, I'm trying to get this person to understand that the kids would rather spend the money with him now to have the experience and the memories now rather than get a deposit into the bank account after he's passed away. And
I love that. Mm.
yeah, so my feeling around that is, we should enjoy our life because there's so much to do. There's so much cool stuff we can do. We don't need to save every penny necessarily. We don't, well, great car, love a fancy new car, but I'd probably rather the experience these days that I
Yeah.
might be able to get instead by having 2 months off work and backpacking, even as an old man, these sorts of things. So I think legacy is doing all of the work to leave the platform of a legacy, but then we have to step back and say, but I give you this and do with this what you please, because
Right.
I think that's what it should be about. I don't know. That's where I got to with legacy.
Mm. You talked about these ancient warrior creeds that say he who sweats more in training bleeds less in war. So that kind of stayed with me because you see, that's the warrior kind of archetype.
Yes.
Yes, training. And for me, it's training the mind kind of to follow the spirit per se, or divine will, in align with that. So body, mind aligned with divine will.
Yeah.
So that came for me as a message, a beautiful message. So thank you for that, for everything. Actually, thank you for the expression of you, Mark, in this reality, for being this person that people can look up to. Like when I saw you, it's like, oh, how amazing. And then the smile on my face. I mean, you just touched me in a very beautiful way. And so I can only imagine young people, meeting you, the way you express yourself is just so inspiring. Thank you for that. Thank you for saying yes to supporting life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I want to mention your services, coaching, and then you have the 12-week mental fitness bootcamp too, and speak engagements. Everything's on your website, mark-luckey.com. It will be clickable, so it's easier that way. You don't have to try to spell that. So I'll have it here. Did I miss anything, Mark? Or would you like to add anything else?
Oh, I think we've covered some really good ground. First of all, thank you very much for
Thank
doing
you.
this and just providing, if nothing else, a conversation that was fun to have and worth getting up for early on a Saturday morning. So even
Ah,
if no one watches it, the conversation was fun. And thank you for doing it and for reaching out.
mm,
I think if anything left unsaid, rather more the reinforcing, and that is keep having the conversations with people, whether it's you in this forum or
yeah,
other people elsewhere, that the conversations and simply being open to the fact that someone else has a different opinion. And if you're bold, celebrate that. Wow, they think that.
right.
I think there's a lot for us to be gained because we're then free of our own thoughts and ideas. We're allowing other people to have theirs. They'll be a better person. That'll reflect back better to us. And keep
Right.
talking in person with real people. I think that's the only one. Be where you are because there's nowhere else to be. Be who you are because everyone else is taken. And then be here now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, beautiful. Thank you so much again for sharing wisdom, timeless wisdom, in my view, and for living it, not just kind of sharing them, but being it. So that's another model that we really kind of crave in this reality as well. Thank you so much again, Mark, for being you, and we'll talk soon. We'll be in touch
Thank,
again. Bye for
thank you
now.
very much, Valeria. Bye for now.